Oliver. How's it going?
Very well, thank you. Yourself?
It's great to see you. I guess I can't believe it's now the 8th of July when we're recording this, and it's already been several months since I last saw you in March in the US.
Yeah, I mean that it's amazing how time flies by. It's completely separately. I read yesterday that I saw Dennis DeYoung mention that the Grand Illusion record by Styx was 49 years old,
Wow.
and you suddenly go, I remember listening to that, my first time probably about 40 years ago. So time does seem to whip by. And yeah, but it was March, and those what were we now? July, so it's 4 months ago. That's really flown by.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so it just seems crazy. Yeah, I remember the day really well. It's a nice show. We met up well before and after, and then right at the end of the show, I seem
Yeah.
to remember the heavens opened and it absolutely belted it down, and it was yeah, it was quite intense rainstorm.
Yeah. Yeah. And we'll talk about the last 4 months and we'll talk about the next several months, but just for the purposes of my friends and anyone who might be watching when I post this, this gentleman right here is Oliver Wakeman, a very accomplished keyboard, piano player, composer. For many in the Yes world, you'll know that Oliver played keyboards in Yes for several years in the mid 2000s. And we'll talk a little bit about Oliver's work before that, during, and after that, including some recent tours, actually, a lot of different touring in 2026, and the release of some albums, including some re releases that are very exciting. And then, of course, many of you may recognize Oliver's last name, Wakeman, being the son of former Yes keyboardist and Hall of Famer Rick Wakeman. But we're going to talk a lot about Oliver. And I think you mentioned the comment about Styx and the album. How about the fact that it's now been about 20 or just over 20 years since the Mother's Ruin album release? We're going to talk a little bit about the re-release that you've put together and put a lot of heart and soul into, but can you give us a quick background on Mother's Ruin and where did that come from?
Mother's Ruin was an album that I did in 2005, and I have this habit when I do records that I tend not to do the same record over and over again. Um, and whereas a lot of bands have a style and a
Right.
sort of sound that they replicate and develop over time, which is a terrific thing because I love bands that do that. But I've always had this sort of desire, mainly because a lot of my work is solo, to try different things. So, my first record was an instrumental piano keyboard record. The second one I did was with Clive Nolan, which was a rock opera. Then I did the album with Steve Howe, which was a big full-on keyboard prog rock, violins, Ilian pipes sort of extravaganza, loosely based on a concept. Then I went back and did a rock opera version of Hound of the Baskervilles with Clive, and then I did a new age record based on the chakras system within the body. And so I sort of jumped around in all these different styles, and then I started working in a sort of Celtic rock band idea that eventually, many years later, would become the Anam record that came out in 24. Um, but once that project had sort of fizzled out and hadn't continued, I sort of thought to myself, right, what do I want to do next? And I realized that I was constantly writing for different musicians all the time. It's like, okay, what color do I want here? Okay, well, violins. But the trouble is, when you do things like Jabberwocky and Hound as well, it was a cast of, I'm not going to say it's a cast of thousands, it was a cast of tens, but there were quite a lot of people there. And my wife had said to me, she said, you do all these records, but you don't go out and actually play. You're still playing in, I was playing in a blues band, I was playing in house bands, I played everywhere. And
Right.
she said, I think you should try and go out and do some shows with your own music now. You've done 4 or 5 albums. I think it's about time you probably got out there. And I've been doing little piano solo spots in, some of the duo gigs and things I'd done where I promoted a little bit of my own music. And I thought to myself, oh, she's probably right. And so I thought, but I don't want to, if I'm going to go out and do that, I need to sort of go out and do it with something. And so I thought, what the one thing I hadn't done at that point was a band album, which was sort of writing for a 5 piece band and trying to keep that sort of identity all the way through the record, uh, based on individual songs rather than based on an entire concept. So that was really interesting, and so that's really how it came about, writing for a band idea. And it started, there was a track I wrote called Mother's Ruin itself, which was my sort of ecological song 20 odd years ago. Um, and then it sort of felt like an appropriate title for the album, because the album, some of the themes were quite similar, but a lot of the themes were sort of personal and about changes and challenges that you get. That's what I was writing lyrics about at the time. And so that's what happened. And it came out 2005.
Right.
Um, it came out to great reviews, and then shortly afterwards, I think the record company went bust, and it sort of became unavailable. And it was only a few years ago when I was actually sort of working through all the reissues of my records, because back in 2000 and probably 18, when I started doing the From a Page reissue, that went down so well when it originally came out that I was asked to re-release a lot of my other records, and they all sort of were coming out in box sets and things. And I sort of realized a few years ago that actually I'd forgotten about Mother's Ruin, and it had never appeared on any streaming services. It had never appeared anywhere. So literally, unless you had one of those original pressings, that was it. Um, and so that's sort of the story of Mother's Ruin. So yeah, it was a great band, great bunch of musicians.
That created distress. Mother, help us, we're out of control. Mother, help us to relinquish our home. Mother, help us with it, your soul is all. Mother, I need you now. Mother, I need you now.
I believe that all of the pieces, or most of the pieces, you wrote yourself, and all the
Yeah,
instrumentation.
yeah. I wrote all the music. I demoed all the guitar parts. I demoed all the vocal parts.
Interesting.
What I tend to do when I write, when I'm writing on my own, when I collaborate with people, it's a different way of working. But when
Gotcha.
I write an album for myself, I generally write all the parts, all the lyrics, all the melodies. I write a lot of the guitar parts. I play a lot of the guitar parts. Um, but then what I do is I realize that, where my forte is in the keyboard world. My guitar playing is good enough to do a lot of the, shall we say, sort of basic guitar parts, or the stuff that's sort of sitting there helping the song move along. But
Right.
when it comes to um, working with other musicians, I've always enjoyed that bit where you get another musician in and you say, "This is the part I want you to sing," and you're just waiting for them to deliver that special 10 or 15% that somebody that really knows their instrument does. So they listen to your part and they go, "Yeah, okay, you want that? How
Right.
about if I just change it and do this a little bit?" And you go, "Oh, that's brilliant. That's the bit that you do as a guitarist that I can't do as a guitarist." But then also throughout the songs as well, it'd be like, "Well, here's a solo spot. Come up with what you think will be a solo," and then people give me lots of ideas, and then I comp stuff together and get an idea of stuff. So I do take quite a lot of control over the records. Um, but I always do it in what I consider to be quite a respectful way to the musicians. So anything that I change or adjust or work with on them, I'll always go back and say, "Look, this is how I think it could really work really well. You gave me three solos. This bit was great. This bit was great. This bit was great. I think it could sound really good if we do this." And generally people come back to me afterwards and just sort of go, "That's no great, absolutely." They trust me that I'm going to do the best thing for the song,
Right.
which is one of the things that I think I've learned over the years becoming a producer as well, because I've produced an awful lot of my records and things that I've been involved in, is that I've become much better at being able to take off my egotistical keyboard player's hat and put on my sensible, think about the song and the product producer's hat, which is ultimately what you have to be able to do. And sorry, I'm jumping between albums here. I know you've asked a question
That's
about
okay.
one record, but
No,
I'm
that's
asking
okay.
answering about 20 of them in one go.
It all ties
Um,
into the conversation, in my opinion.
yeah. So something like Anam Cara, which was the record I did in 2024, which was an eight-piece band on there with saxophone and Ilian pipes and whistles, but was a vocal-driven album. There were, when I got to finish all the demos on that, before I'd actually bought in the violins and all the whistles, a lot of those parts were keyboard parts. And I had my producer's hat on and went, "Actually, do you know what? I think these should be pipes." And so I got the pipe player to play the parts and then adjust them, which was the wonderful Troy Denocoli, who adjusted some parts, came up with his own parts as well. He said, "I've sent some improvising improvisation bits as well. Um, and that's how it worked. So with my producer's hat on, I actually took out a lot of my keyboard parts. And so, but you have to be, well, for me, it's all about the song and the story you're trying to convey,
Yeah.
and the instruments are the things that create the color and the atmosphere around the story you're trying to tell. So some songs will be more keyboard heavy than others. Others will be, more guitar driven. So there's a song on there called the Queen's Lament, which is a classical guitar driven piece of music, and it's because I replayed all the original classical guitar parts on it. But I got Oliver Day to come in and replace them all because he's such a good classical guitar player. He plays with such finesse. It's like, well, you don't need me to play that. You can play it much better than I can. So, but that's what the song needed. And there's obviously always the part you go, oh, I'm not on the first 30 seconds of this song. It's my running album, but then you have to go, well, tough. This is what the song needs. The keyboards will come in and help build and help arrange. And that's the role that the keyboards take in that song.
Yeah.
And there's other songs, and there's a track called In the Moonlight where I play most of in fact, I play all the guitar on it, and the keyboards are generally being quite gentle, and I'm having a great time in the background thrashing around on a guitar. But it's just, you do what the song requires. And so I completely forget what the original question was, but I'm hoping that there was an
It's all
answer
right.
in there
No,
somewhere.
that's great. So, I'll tie together the conversation around wearing the producer's hat with
Mhm.
a point that I wanted to make sure we covered today, and that is around not so much about rehashing too much about your time in Yes, right, which was 2008 to 2011. I'll
Mhm.
take a quick sidebar before I get back to the producer conversation
That's okay.
and the release of From a Page. But myself, my father, we met you, I believe it was Mohegan Sun Casino in 2008.
Mohegan Sun,
When
2008. Yeah,
you
in
were
the foyer. Yeah, when we
kicking off
first
the
turned
tour
up.
with Yes, and
Show
that was
5, I think it was. Show 5.
okay. There you go. I appreciate you knowing those details. And so it's an interesting thing because I've seen every incarnation of Yes from the 90s and forward, because I was 5 years old at the Talk Tour, which was Trevor Rabin and Tony Kaye with Alan, Chris, and John Anderson. And then there was the Keys to Ascension phase, which they didn't do any shows on the East Coast. And then it changed again. Rick was no longer in the band. Billy Sherwood was in the band. Open Your Eyes and The Ladder were the two albums that came out. And there was a gentleman named Igor Korshev, then a gentleman named Tom Brislin, and then it was the full orchestra. And then your father was back in the band. And then there was a hiatus, 2004, 5, 6, 7. John was doing solo stuff, et cetera, et cetera. And long story short is Yes came back on the road in 2008, featuring another vocalist, which was a very interesting dynamic in the world of Yes, since with the exception of perhaps 1.5 years, it had always been officially John Anderson. So Benoit David was that gentleman who sang for a few years. But you played keyboards, and that was really exciting because, first of all, you kicked ass. You did an amazing job with the
Thank you.
playing and the sounds. It was the first time in many years that we heard Yes do stuff off of their drama album. You did Tempest Fugit and Machine Messiah. Which again was excellent as a fan, and me growing up at the time to really enjoy that music. But the one thing that didn't happen is we didn't get a proper studio album with you on it. And of course, I think myself and most people didn't really know at the time that so much writing, recording, demos, and planning had been done around an album. And it wasn't until more recently where you released From a Page and then the re-release of From a Page with the expanded material, which is fantastic, that I personally really became more knowledgeable about what happened. And so we won't rehash so many things that you've already told the world about the writing of music, the recording of music. What interested me the most about From a Page, especially the expanded edition, was getting into your head a little bit as the producer, tying this all together now. And so I'm going to start with a personal favorite, which is Aliens.
Uh-huh.
And from when Yes were touring in 2008, and for Chris Squire's solo spot, there was this piece of music presented, Aliens Are Only Us from the Future. The thing that I was very intrigued in was Chris is putting out some new ideas musically. The band is experimenting with it live on stage. You and your piano playing being a cornerstone of that piece. And then how it evolved over the course of the tour. You got a little bit of Alan White in there, and it started to build out. And then it was more than just shakers and tapping. He was playing a rhythm. And
Yeah.
so when I heard the Oliver Wakeman From a Page Aliens proper recording, I was just blown away at how great it was and is because of how much I love that piece of music, even if it's kind of a funny thing. What is Chris singing about? I've always loved the lyrics. I've always loved his voice. I've loved Benoit on it. I love the piano on it. And you really brought something to life that I think Chris would be over the moon about, no pun intended.
Yeah.
And so before I turn it over to you about Aliens, one of the things that intrigued me also was that you indicated in some of the literature that came with the expanded album that you had to get a little creative about the drumming and how to fill in drum parts that captured what Alan was doing on tour and maybe where he would have gone with it had it been properly recorded because it hadn't been recorded at the time. So I'd love to hear, as a crazy Chris Squire fan, I've got my Chris shirt on today. Little bit of my Chris Squire jewelry in ode to
Yeah.
my fallen hero and friend and your former bandmate. But tell us a little bit about Aliens and how you got to where it is today.
So, I can distinctly remember Chris saying to me about doing Aliens on stage because we had been rehearsing in Canada. We were playing in Hamilton, was our very first show. And I can distinctly remember it was about 3 weeks before the first show. I was in England and they had sent me the music for the tour, a set list for the tour.
3 weeks
And
before the tour?
3 weeks for the tour, yeah, we finally had the set list agreed and they sent me the music. And when I say they sent me the music, Chris organized a box set of which 4 of the albums in the box set we weren't doing anything from. So it was, I guess, I remember all this stuff turning up. And so I resorted back to going out and picking up some bits and pieces. And I had some of the records, obviously, myself. But what a lot of people sort of don't think about or would imagine as what happened didn't happen, which is I wasn't born and then learnt to play roundabout from the age of 5. I had actually never played a Yes piece of music in my entire career up until the point that I joined Yes, because in all honesty, it's not that it didn't interest me, but I've always been quite keen on pursuing my own sort of path. And I know it might sound odd when people think that, oh yeah, but then you played in Yes like your dad and you did the Strawbs like your dad. The difference is that those bands sort of came to me and said, we want to go out and do some stuff.
Right.
And we think you'd be a really good fit for the band with, the way that you play. So I'd never spent my time playing Yes pieces of music or practicing Yes pieces of music because I'd always been more interested in doing other things. I played in house bands, function bands, anywhere I could play, I played. And I just loved playing music and I loved writing and I loved doing that sort of stuff. So when you said, come and join the band, it was amazing, because obviously I liked listening to the music. I loved listening to it. But then I suddenly realized, actually, I don't have a load of inbuilt knowledge here. And contrary to also what, a lot of people might imagine happened is, uh, my dad never showed me anything on the piano. We never sat and I said to Dad, "Oh, so how did you do roundabout?" It was literally like the way of picking up picking up a record, putting up the needle, putting it down, listening to the part, going, what was it doing? Oh, right, okay, let's see what I can work that out. Sometimes stuff's quiet in the mix, and you're sort of slowly picking your way through. There is a point to this to get to your question.
Yeah, no, this is fascinating. I think a lot of people will be excited to hear about the inner
So,
workings. So,
so I'm doing all this and I'm charting stuff out and I'm writing out chord charts and I'm writing out little bits of score for bits that I really need to remember. And and then I'm sort of we get over to Hamilton and I've organized a few of my own keyboards to come over, but I realize that I don't have enough of what I need. So a load of new keyboards are there as well. So I put together this rig of about 8 or 9 keyboards. And I try to go down the route of thinking, okay, what I don't want to be doing, because there's so much music to remember, I don't want to be thinking about keyboards being split with a trumpet on one half and a mellotron on the other and having to make 10 patch changes throughout a song. So I thought what I want to do is go for what I would consider a bit like an old 70s rig, which is one thing is there, it's the piano. There's another one there, that's the Rode piano. There's another one there, which is an all-purpose synth. That one there is going to do my mellotron strings. That one over there is my Moog. There's my vocoder. There's my, things like that. So I had a couple of multi-purpose synths and the rest of them were things. So when I was playing, it was like, I need a piano. I know where I'm going. Also, I sort of felt with Yes, you do need that sort of show. It needs that visible show of keyboards because I sort of think that is one of the things that people often associate with Yes.
right.
The other thing that I felt that I wanted to do in the band, which was, I'm trying to think of the right way to describe this in a that makes sense. When I've watched Dad play with the band, and I've seen Dad play with the band on many occasions, he doesn't often play the solos in the majority of the time as they were on the record. So, for example, he played a different solo on And You and I. He would do a different solo in different places, and that was fine because Dad had earned the right to do that because he wrote the original parts. So he has the right to adjust them and do the parts that he wants to do. I didn't feel that I could come into the band and go, okay, well, okay, so there's a solo here and You and I, right, what can I come up with? My viewpoint was, okay, what can I do that I can bring to the band? And that was maybe some authenticity. I could go back and work out what was the original And You and I solo, what was the original part that was played at the beginning of Heart of the Sunrise, rather than some different way of doing it that Dad got into doing. It was like, okay, what can I bring that makes the show a little bit different? And that's what I decided to do. So I was trying to go back to more authentic sounds, and I was trying to go back to do that, which made learning the music quite difficult because obviously,
Right.
you being a huge Yes fan yourself, and obviously the band you play with and knowing the arrangements of things, they over the years, Yes, have often experimented with slightly different arrangements of quite well-known pieces, and you sort of think, crikey, the piece is already complicated enough. Why are you changing it? Something like Roundabout has different arrangement parts in it. Something like And You and I would be different in places. And so I was having to learn these original parts, but play along to live recordings where those parts weren't there. So you're trying to actually think in 2 different ways. So you almost had to learn the song twice. So when I got to America, we had this whole new rig and I was trying to do it all. And then, of course, when you start playing with a band, for those that don't ever play with a band, when you've just played along to records, you suddenly realize, that there isn't, when you're practicing along to something, there's always a safety net. Whereas when you're in a band and you're up there performing or practicing, there's no safety net. If you start forgetting something, your brain won't listen to what's going on in the background and pick it back up again. So you've got to be really, really on top of your parts to make sure you don't go wrong, or the song well enough that you can get yourself out of it. So there was an awful lot of rehearsal that happened. So I did a lot of rehearsing before I went over to America for this week, and then we went over and we had 9 days of full rehearsal for 9 days rehearsal, and then first show. And it turned out that the first set was we rehearsed 3.5 hours worth of material. So well, that was, so when I watch the tours now, and it's like, oh, we're doing all of Fragile, and then the next tour is we're doing all of Close to the Edge. On that first show, we did all of Fragile, all of Close to the Edge, and everything off of the Yes album, bar Adventure, which we had rehearsed as well. So, plus Owner of a Lonely Heart, plus Soon, plus Onward,
Tempest Fugit, Machine Messiah.
and yeah, those two, I forgot those. Yeah. So we had an awful lot of stuff that I'd had to get into my head and cram into my head. And this is the point that gets to aliens. So this bit doesn't make sense unless I go through that first part. But then after about day 7, Chris said, it's going quite well. And I was thinking, yeah, it's good because Benoit's come in. He's been singing in a tribute band, so he knows 3/4 of the material already. Chris, Steve, and Alan have been playing this music for 40 years. I've been playing it for 3 weeks. And what they don't know is every morning I've woken up. The rehearsal started at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. Every morning I was up at 8 o'clock in that rehearsal room playing for 5 hours on my own before they would turn up. And then we would rehearse until about 7, 8 o'clock when everybody would go off to eat. I would eat something and go back to my room with a little MIDI keyboard and practice certain parts over and over again until it got to midnight. And then I would go to bed. And I did that every night to try and just absorb as much of this information as I could. And then on day 7, where I think to myself, do you know what? The show is in about 3 days' time or 4 days' time. We've got 2 more days rehearsal. We've got a production full run through. No, 5 days to go. And then Chris goes, I think we'll have a day off to go and do a photo shoot. And I'm thinking, oh no, please don't take a day of our rehearsals away. And so we had to go off and do these photo shoots. And I think it's all right, we'll come back. And then what they did the day before the last production rehearsal, we had to move out of the big sound stage we were in, and we had to move into another smaller studio to do some last bit of rehearsing. And I remember just before that happened, Chris said to me, he said, I've got an idea. I went, what? He said, I've got an idea for another piece of music. And I was like, are you kidding me? I said, I've got 3.5 hours worth of music, desperately trying to escape my brain at the moment. I'm doing everything I can to keep it in there. And you want to add another piece of music in? He said, yeah. I went, all right. So what do you mean? He went, I thought, oh, well, he'll ask me to play some strings on something. That'll be all right. I can just follow it. And he said, I want it to be based around the piano. And I thought, oh God. He said, so can you come up with an arrangement? And I can distinctly remember sitting there with him at the piano, and he was giving me all the, the rhythms that he wanted to come in and exactly how he wanted it to be. And I remember thinking at the time, oh my God, Chris, I'm already under enough pressure here to try and do this. I've already got the weight of being the least knowledgeable of playing Yes music out of the 5 of us. I said, I'm walking on stage, taking over effectively from Dad. I mean, that's enough pressure as it is, in front of Yes fans who are phenomenally knowledgeable about everything Yes. And you're asking me to do something else. And it was like, I sort of thought, oh, well, all right. So what do you want? And he played me this song. He'd actually given me the demo of this song as well afterwards, and said when we were getting to doing the album, he gave me his original demo. And I enjoyed playing it on the tour, and it was really nice because he would finish his bass bit, which was sometimes a mixture of all of his different things like the fish, and sometimes there was elements of, I think it was Whitefish, wasn't it, that they did on the 901.
A little bit of Sound Chaser, Silent Wings of Freedom.
Yeah, that was it. So he'd often mix it up and do that. And then I would walk on side of stage and just start playing the piano part. And I remember doing this and thinking, oh, it's great. And then Benoit would come on, and Benoit would have one of those little egg shakers doing a rhythm. And then Alan would join in and just tap a little rhythm. Like you said, he developed it over the time. And I ended up thinking, I really like this, but then it sort of got dropped at the end of the tour to bring in other music. So we never played it on 2008. And then when I was doing the expanded version of From a Page, for those that don't know, essentially From a Page was originally the 4 songs that I was heavily involved with writing. But the expanded edition was the opportunity for me to actually portray the other pieces of music that we had heavily worked on as a 5-piece before Trevor had been involved in it at all. I mean, the versions of The Man You See in Me and Hour of Need and things were stuff that we absolutely demoed up on our own beforehand and ended up on the record with not a lot of changes. But by doing the expanded version, it allowed me to get those versions back and actually add the keyboard parts that I had scored or written out or wanted to do. For me, Into the Storm was an important one because I wrote quite a lot of Into the Storm, and I was always quite sad that a lot of the parts that I had that really helped drive the song along weren't on the Fly From Here version.
Right.
So it was really nice to be able to do Into the Storm as I'd sort of imagined it. So anyway, so when it came to doing Aliens, I thought, do you know what? It would be really nice if I could find a way of putting Aliens on the record. And I thought, I have no idea how I'm going to do that. So I found lots of bootlegs of Aliens. I found lots of sort of scratchy phone recordings of it. I found all these things, and I tried to use like modern separation tools to see what I could save from this. Could I make something of it? And then you're getting into that murky issue of copyright between somebody that's bootlegged a song, but they technically own the recording of it, and you end up in this whole world of this just not going to work. It's not going to happen. And then I was sorting through some CDs and bits and pieces, trying to find all the bits and pieces that we had, and I came across a CD with Chris's name on it, and there was his demo version of Aliens that he'd recorded when he had a flat in Chelsea.
Wow.
And I listened to it and I thought, I wonder. And so I used the separation tool and managed to isolate his bass and his vocals. And I thought, okay, so I can build the piano part that I wrote, and and then I thought to myself, what would Chris like? How would Chris think about this? And I started thinking about Onward, and I was thinking, he worked really nicely with orchestras, and obviously his Fish Out of Water record with the orchestra. And I remember thinking Onward, and I thought, I think a little bit of orchestration, keyboard orchestration around this would be quite nice. And I thought, what would be nice if the song developed through synths and keyboards from Mellotrons and Moogs into Mellotrons and Moogs with orchestra and horns and things like that. So it was a bit of a sort of homage to the way that Onward was done.
Yeah.
And so I did that work to it. And I thought, it's really nice. It's such a shame I haven't got Alan around anymore, because Alan had passed away by this point. And I was going through the Gift of Love files. And of course, when you're creating the record, you're looking at set lists, the order of the track listing, you're looking at the tempos of the songs, how they're going to work. And I looked at the tempo of Gift of Love, and then I looked at the tempo of Aliens, and they were practically the same. And the thing about when we did the recording for Gift of Love, what we did is we didn't record to I'm not going to say we didn't record to a click track, because we had a click track going, but because we were playing together, where all the bass arrangements from a page were done with us on a stage in the studio together. So the trick was to play as a band and just keep the drums, so that you then keep the drums. So even though the drummer is playing to a click, you're speeding up and slowing down, and you're playing naturally with the band. So I had these other takes of Alan doing Gift of Love, and then I was listening back to sort of some of the parts that he played when we played on stage with Aliens, and thought, I wonder. And I started pulling out bits and pieces and putting it into Aliens. And then I also found, oddly enough, an egg shaker of one of the tracks was an egg shaker doing exactly the egg shaker part that Benoit had done live. And so I put the egg shaker in. It's like, oh my God, this sounds just like we started the song live. And then it was like, okay, so how can I build it? And then, of course, as all musicians are, we have certain fills, certain runs, certain things that we do that we epitomize who we are, because there are bits that we can jump to use in certain scenarios. And I found that some of the roles and things that Alan would have done when he played Aliens. And then when I put them into the part, you could hear that how Alan and Chris thought about things the same way, which is how they were such a good rhythm section. Because when I put Alan's drums in, him and Chris just locked together in a way that it just was amazing to me. You put them together and it was like they'd been in a room and crafted this part together. And that was how it was.
It sounds so natural to me.
Yeah.
And it sounds so realistic. And I don't mean it's not realistic, right? But this is where I wanted to tie in the producer hat comment for a moment. Is major kudos to you for discovering this.
Designated discoverers.
Together we're back in time. I guess that all makes sense.
Today we are back in time. The day will come. We'll have passports to the sun.
you managed to make it as though Alan played the part with Chris and recorded it. But the amazing thing is that you used technology to recreate the spirit of
Yeah.
Alan and Chris using Alan and Chris. And
Yeah.
I know the world is going in a place of what's real versus fake versus AI versus human created. This is human created and human produced with the help from technology. And I think that you recreated something very special. And I really appreciate the work that you did on Aliens. But there's so much of a story to tell about other songs on the album as well. Is there anything about Aliens before I move on that you'd want to?
Only that the important thing for me was that I got in touch with Scotty, because I keep in touch with Scotty, Chris's widow.
Yeah, yeah.
And I wrote to her and Gigi, who is Alan's widow, and I said, this is what I want to do. This is what I would like to do. This is how I think it could sound, but I'm not going to do anything unless you tell me it's okay.
Yeah.
So it was really important. And Gigi came back and said, no, absolutely, whatever you want to do that you think would be respectful to Alan, I trust you on. And Scotty came back and was almost in tears. She said, Chris would love it. She said, Chris would love that you'd done this. And so
And coming from her, that's extremely the highest level of meaningfulness that I think one can achieve.
And the one thing I will say is that, I believe in all elements of what we do. Technology is wonderful. It's when we use technology as a tool to aid human creation, that is where it is tremendous. Where it is the substitute for human creation, that is the bit that gets harder. So I use these. I mean, you can use AI singing tools, which are fantastic. If you sing your own part and then get an AI to replace it, which you're using to help another real singer come in and understand what you as a creator are trying to do, that's using AI as a tool. If you then release the record with the AI singer, that's where we get into slightly different areas of how to use AI. And I'm not going to say what's right or wrong.
Right.
Me, I think technology like these stem splitting tools are really useful, because it really allows us to go back in time and recreate things that otherwise we wouldn't be able to do. And I just felt with Yes, particularly now as Alan and Chris have passed, there is so little sort of unreleased Yes stuff. This felt like a real opportunity to find a sort of proper hidden Yes track, which I think it is really.
Yeah. And I mean, we said coming from Scotland Squire is the top of the list in terms of validating what Chris might have thought. Wherever I fall on the list doesn't matter, but I would say that the first thing that I thought when listening to this was, holy shit, Chris would love this. And I think you did such an amazing thing bringing that song to life and bringing Chris to life. His vocals sound so perfect and crisp and real that it's like you really did something special in honor of Chris and Alan in that song.
Well, I'll have to give credit to Carl Groom as well, who's the engineer on that record, because Carl did the mixing for that record. He also did the mix for the Live from Leon record, which I think a lot of people have said is a very nice sounding record.
Yeah.
And he, again, because he'd mixed the original from a page, his first thoughts were, if we're going to do this and bring in tracks that were originally from Fly From Here and re-add keyboards, he said, the first thing I'm going to do is go through and do treatments on all the stuff so that I can bring it in line with how it sounded when we recorded from a page, so that we actually create a new production level of it that actually makes the album work as an album, rather than just, you can hear that was from this record, that was from that record. So, I have to give credit to Carl as well. He was very diligent in making it sound cohesive.
Yeah. And so what I'll say to anybody watching this is I absolutely love the original From a Page, and the From a Page expanded reissue that came out this year is just over the top. Not only does it have the fantastic Roger Dean artwork and the classic Yes proper release, which I'm sure you're very proud of, and I'm so happy to see that on your behalf, but Yes fans, it's one of the best Yes releases of the year. I know there's a lot happening in the world of Yes, lots of re-releases, but this one really kind of feels like something new, and yet something different and something special. And I know we could talk another hour about all the tracks on From a Page, but for purposes of time, and this is one of the two things I want to cover before we have to wrap this up. But I think, folks, you got to go listen to From a Page head to toe, including all the extended re-release material. There's one called Updraft, which is sort of Alan and Oliver in the studio writing and jamming on the idea, which became, I think, the pinnacle section of the song Into the Storm.
2, 3, 4.
That's a pure studio run through. Alan and Oliver thing.
I don't mind doing another call if you want to at some point, and I can go through all these bits with you because there's stories to all of this.
I would love to do that. I think fans would appreciate that. So here we are, folks. We're going to promise a deeper dive into From a Page, maybe a track by track, and really talk about, yes, the writing of the music with Oliver, the production of it. But while we're on the topic, and we mentioned just how busy your 2026 is from a performing perspective. Now, I mentioned, and folks probably in the US would have known that yourself and your father did the father and son tour, playing many shows February and March. I think I was at 4 of them. It was a really, really great piano concert. But the other thing that the UK is getting, and some folks in Europe, is the From a Page live show where you're playing stuff from your solo career, other collaborations that you've done, a number of tracks from a Page, and maybe just a couple of little Yes tributes, or even an ABWH tribute. I don't know if tribute's the right word, right? But playing those songs, in honor of the greatness of those songs, and for the fans who love Yes.
Yeah.
So tell us about the upcoming shows that you have. I think you're doing maybe 10 shows in the UK, Netherlands, and Germany this November.
Yeah, we are. So I've got quite a busy year. We've got September. I'm doing a few shows with Dad, which are Wakeman and Son shows. We're doing 3 shows in a theatre in September, all in the same theatre, which I'm looking forward to. And then the November shows, as you said, the From a Page tour. And so basically it's a show of 2 halves. First half is music from my solo and collaborative career. So therefore we play music from Mother's Ruin, which we do. Adam Cara we're playing music from. Some of the rock operas I did with Clive, we do some tracks from Jabberwocky and Hound, and the Ravens and Lullabies record, which is the record I did with Gordon Giltrap. So we do music from those records. And then in the second half we do this sort of Yes From a Page section where we play some of the music from that record. And it's great fun. I mean, it's a really nice show. Everybody that comes along seems to really enjoy it. We sort of did the first shows at the beginning of the year, a bit tentative because we weren't sure whether anybody was going to come out and actually watch the show. And we were having an awful lot of people come to the shows, which was phenomenally rewarding for me and the band.
Yeah,
because the audiences were so enthusiastic, so happy with what we were doing, that it just made it such an enjoyable evening. And being able to get up there and play the tracks from a Page, and particularly we did Into the Storm, like I said, with the new keyboard parts, it was just great. It was so much fun. And all the little, we threw a couple of Yes tracks in there as well. And what was quite nice was I read a review that said it was nice to see the band do a nod to some of the other Yes pieces, but the whole show wasn't built on sort of hanging off of the Yes catalog. And that's
when I said the word tribute, I think a nod to is more appropriate than saying tribute, right? Because I don't want to spoil it, but I think you did like the Worm section of Starship Trooper. Yeah. You didn't go out there and play Starship Trooper and All Good People and then You and I.
Because as you well know, there are some bands out there that do a great job, and you don't need another one going, me going out and doing that. And it's so what I like is I like picking out a couple of bits and pieces and just sort of using it as a bit of my heritage, because I sort of I played with the band for 3 or 4 years. I've written with them. I've appeared on a few different records and live records. So I sort of felt to myself, okay, you've got enough you've got enough sort of history in the band to actually play some of the music you wrote with the band and pick
Yeah,
a couple of
absolutely.
other pieces out. But I thought it was also important to recognize, you know, the solo career that I've done, because obviously that is the part of my career that is going to continue to develop. And it's nice that people come along. And so many people came up to me and said, "Oh, I came along for the front page. I had no idea about this other stuff." And they pick up a copy of Mother's Ruin, and I get people writing to me just saying, "I feel bad that for some reason I'd never sort of bought any of your stuff, and now where can I find it?" You know, and people are
Yeah.
then sort of going back and discovering the back catalogue, which is great. You know, it's lovely because there's so much good music out there that when you get the opportunity for people to hear your stuff, it's, you know, you're just grateful that people come along
Yeah.
and enjoy it. So
And
we're
I'm one of
doing,
those people. I'm one of those people, sorry to interrupt, that went back and said, let me really sink my teeth into this, you know? And it's not like I've listened to it 100 times. I'm just getting into things and hearing
yeah.
it and exploring it. So I think it's a great thing.
Yeah, it's good. I mean, I did the same thing when I find bands that I love, you know, and you suddenly, you know, people often say to me, "Are you listening to what's the latest new band you've discovered?" And I sort of go, "Do you know, I'm still discovering all the music from the bands I originally loved and all their solo records. I'm still working my way through all that, you know." And so I sort of really enjoy doing the show. So when we go out in November, we're doing six in the UK, where we're doing five shows around theatres, and then we're doing a headline slot at a festival. And then we go out to the Netherlands to do a couple of shows. And then we head out to Germany to do some shows. And then
Yeah.
we're currently looking into doing more stuff in April next year. So I'm thoroughly looking forward to that. And then I literally, in the same way that when I did the tour with Dad earlier on this year, I literally flew back from America on the Monday night, arrived back on Tuesday, and I was in a rehearsal room on Friday to rehearse my band show.
We
We had
spoke
our
about
first
that.
show on Saturday.
We
Yeah.
spoke about that. Yeah.
So that was pretty exhausting. So this tour I actually finished. I come back from Germany at the end of the From a Page tour. I have 2 days at home, and then I go back out with Dad to
For the
do another for a
Christmas.
Christmas tour. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's like the reversal this time. I get to do my band first, and then I do Dad's, as opposed to the other way around
Right.
at the
Right.
beginning of the year. Um, so there's an awful lot of stuff going on this year, and in between, I'm trying to write the next solo album with the band.
Nice.
And I'm working on a new collaboration project with somebody, which I'll, you know, hopefully we can announce at some point. But we're still in the early stages of writing that at the moment. Um, uh, so it's phenomenally busy, and yeah, you just sort of, I think everything you do as a musician, I always have this. I wrote a song many years ago on the Ravens and Lullabies record called "Is This the Last Song I Write?"
Mm.
And it's that sort of fear that a musician has that the well is going to dry up and that one day you're just going to run out of ideas and run out of music. And so I'm sort of desperately trying to write and do as much stuff as I can before my brain starts going, "That's it, you're out of ideas now." So it's while I can still think of the ideas, I'm keen to do as much as I can.
I would say, you know, in wrapping this up, again, folks, for purposes of time, we're going to close this one down in just a minute here. And hopefully we'll have a part two where we can expand upon a lot of this. But obviously, Oliver, I would say, and maybe it's my own fault or maybe it's just the way it is, but I think in the last year, you've had a lot more consistent presence, like answering Q&As from fans. And something about From a Page, I feel, has potentially or perhaps reinvigorated the archival side and the creative side and the producer side. And I personally think that that's going to have an effect on how you write your next album. Just kind of, you took a step into the past, brought
Yeah.
it forward, and then, you know, the new creative side will bring something forward, hopefully in the next year or two. Do you think there might be any From a Page shows in the US? I know that's complicated and costly, and there are
It's
factors outside of
it's
desire, but what do you think about that?
it's complicated and costly, but if I could make it pay and work, I would love to do it. But it's just the, you know, airline flights are expensive, sorting out gear,
Yeah,
travel for people. There's so many logistics involved.
yeah.
But you know, if the demand was there, I mean, to be honest, the album has sold really well. I mean, I don't know how it did over in America, but in England, it got up to number 4 in the rock charts, and it was in the top 20 in our main charts here. And then, but I think the record company weren't expecting the response that it got, so it sold out. and so people haven't been able to get hold of it for 2 months. So it's literally sold out within 2 months, and they just sort of went, "How did that happen?" And so they've had to do an emergency repressing. So there is a new version, new stock arriving hopefully in about a week's time. But because the packaging is quite complicated, because it's a clamshell case with a poster and art cards, the actual lead time for manufacturing, it's not just like going, oh, we need another,
Right.
you know, a couple of thousand digipacks or a couple of thousand jewel cases. It's a, you know, it's a beautifully designed package which
Yeah.
Mercury have put together. So so anybody that's still looking for it, it will be back available soon.
Great.
Yeah, so it's you know, so if it continues to sell and people are still interested in it, then hopefully at some point somebody will say, let's see if there's a way that we can make this work, you know.
Yeah.
Uh,
And I think you hit a lot of the markets that are typically the most popular. And I don't mean small in terms of size or anything, but when you're going to Philadelphia, New York, and some of the places that you went through on the Wakeman and Son tour, that kind of market is usually very rabid for prog rock music. There's some festivals, and we could have a separate conversation about that, because I think there's a lot of opportunity for you to do your own thing in these areas, and hopefully we'll get a chance to see that in the near future. But I just want to say thank you so much for making time. It was such a pleasure to see you again in person a whole bunch of times in the last several months, where when you were on tour, we got to chat about some of those memories of 08, 09, 10, 11. And I think what you've done, again, as a crazy Yes fan, and crazy is the wrong word, right? But as a massive Yes fan, my father's the crazy Yes fan, right?
yeah,
As a massive Yes fan, and for whatever it's worth, at least for me, like being a musician who plays in a Yes tribute band, knows the music, loves the music, loves the new Yes album, John and the Band, there's all this stuff happening in the world of Yes, the extended universe of Yes. I'm personally so glad to see your come up again
yeah,
in the world of Yes with such a fantastic official release. And the work that you've done on it is really just to be so proud of. I'll repeat that I think Chris and Alan, and I'm sure you must have Steve's blessing and all that kind of stuff to do what you've done. I think you've really made the Yes world proud in what you put out there. And thank you for that. And we look forward to seeing any of your future projects, solo, touring, in and out of the world of Yes. We're looking forward to seeing what you do next, and really appreciate your time again chatting with me. And sounds like we'll do it again.
that's absolutely, absolutely. It'd be great fun. So thank you very
All
much.
right. Thanks again.